In the heart of the world's largest jungle, more than 1,000 miles from the sea, sits a monument to an age that should not exist there. The Teatro Amazonas, an opera house of impossible grandeur, an echo of Renaissance Europe dropped into the humid depths of the Amazon. The official story is one of ambition. A tale of rubber barons, flush with unimaginable wealth, who willed a palace of culture into existence. They tell us that between 1884 and 1896, this masterpiece was constructed from scratch. They claim that every component, from the foundation stones to the chandelier crystals, was brought from the Old World. Thousands of tons of Italian marble, a steel frame from Scotland, roofing tiles from Alsace, France, furniture from Paris, all of it, they say, was shipped across the Atlantic, then navigated 1,000 miles up one of the most treacherous river systems on Earth, to a small, provincial town carved out of the wilderness. It is a romantic, compelling story, a testament to human will. But it is also a fantasy. When you move past the romance and begin to examine the logistics, the story falls apart. The math does not work. The technology of the era does not support it. The official narrative is a carefully constructed facade, designed to conceal a much deeper and more unsettling historical anomaly. In this investigation, we will dismantle that facade. We will examine the ships that could not have made the journey, the port that could not have handled the cargo, and the numbers that prove the official story is a logistical impossibility. What we are told is a symbol of ambition, is in fact evidence of a history that has been deliberately obscured. To understand the scale of the problem, you must first look closely at the object itself. The Teatro Amazonas is not merely a large building. It is a specific, highly refined piece of European architecture. It wasn't built with local materials, adapted to the local environment. It was built in defiance of it. Consider the dome. It is covered in 36,000 decorated ceramic tiles, imported from Alsace, France. They are laid out in a mosaic depicting the Brazilian flag. Each tile had to be designed, fired, glazed, packed into crates, loaded onto a ship, survive a 5,000-mile ocean voyage, then a 1,000-mile river journey, then be unloaded and meticulously installed by skilled craftsmen. Who were these craftsmen? Were they local laborers trained in the complex art of French mosaic tiling? Or were they, too, imported? Now, step inside. The main staircase, the grand hall, the columns and statues are not plaster or painted wood. They are Carrara marble, from Italy. Thousands of tons of it. Quarried from the mountains of Tuscany, shaped by Italian artisans, then shipped halfway around the world to be reassembled in the jungle. Think of a single one of those marble steps. Its weight, its fragility, the precision required to fit it. Now multiply that by the hundreds of tons that make up the interior. Look up at the chandeliers. They are not local reproductions. They are Murano glass, from Venice. Intricate, delicate, priceless. Each one had to be disassembled, packed, and shipped with unimaginable care. What happens if a single crate is dropped on a primitive dock? What happens if a flood washes away the warehouse? The project would be delayed for months, waiting for a replacement from a small island in the Venetian lagoon. And beneath it all, holding the entire structure together, is a skeleton of steel. The walls and roof are supported by steel girders forged in Glasgow, Scotland. These are not small beams. They are massive, heavy industrial components, the cutting edge of technology for their time. This is the material of the Eiffel Tower, of the great railway bridges of Europe. And we are asked to believe it was brought here, to Manaus. Now, look at Manaus itself in the 1890s. The archival photographs show a different world. They show muddy, unpaved streets, simple wooden structures, a small, struggling town clinging to the riverbank, constantly fighting back the encroachment of the jungle. It is a frontier outpost. There are no grand avenues, no sprawling infrastructure. The port is a simple affair, a collection of wooden piers. The anomaly is the jarring visual contradiction. This building does not belong to its environment. It does not belong to the documented technological level of the city it sits in. It is an artifact of a different world, placed where it should not, could not, be. The question isn't who paid for it. The question is, how did it physically get here? How was this structure, a product of Europe's most advanced industrial and artistic centers, assembled in a place with none of that capacity? The visual evidence alone presents a paradox that the official story simply waves away with the magic wand of rubber money. But money cannot suspend the laws of physics. It cannot conjure cranes and paved roads and skilled labor out of thin air. The story of the Teatro Amazonas is not a story of architecture. It is a story of logistics. And it is here that the entire narrative collapses. Let us trace the journey of a single steel girder, from Glasgow to Manaus. First, it is forged in Scotland. It is then transported to the port, a major industrial harbor with established railways and heavy cranes. It is loaded onto a deep-water ocean liner, a vessel designed for the harsh conditions of the North Atlantic. This part of the journey is plausible. The ship then sails approximately 5,000 miles to the mouth of the Amazon River in Brazil. This would take several weeks. But at the mouth of the river, the journey has only just begun. The real challenge lies ahead. Manaus is not on the coast. It is 1,000 miles inland. The ocean liner that crossed the Atlantic cannot make this journey. Its deep draft makes it unsuitable for a river with shifting sandbars, hidden obstacles, and unpredictable depths. So, the cargo must be transferred. Where does this transfer happen? In Belém, at the mouth of the river? This would require a port with its own heavy lift cranes, capable of moving multi-ton steel beams and marble blocks from one ship to another. Did such a port exist in the 1880s, with this specific capacity? The records are thin. Let's assume it did. The cargo is now loaded onto smaller, shallow draft river steamers. These are not ocean-going vessels. They are smaller, less powerful, and have a much lower cargo capacity. The journey up the Amazon is not a simple boat ride. It is a battle against the current. The river's path changes seasonally. A channel that was safe one month could be a sandbar the next. Navigational charts for deep draft cargo ships were rudimentary at best. The journey would be slow and fraught with risk. A single grounded vessel could block traffic for weeks, or be lost entirely along with its irreplaceable cargo. And we are not talking about one shipment. We are talking about a continuous, massive supply chain operating for over a decade. Let's consider the weight. Estimates for the total imported tonnage range from 10,000 to over 20,000 tons. Let's be conservative and say 15,000 tons. The average cargo steamer of the late 19th century might carry 1,500 to 2,000 tons. This means a minimum of 8 to 10 full shiploads crossing the Atlantic. But then, this cargo has to be transferred to smaller riverboats. If a river steamer could only carry, say, 300 tons of this specialized, heavy cargo, that's 50 separate river journeys. 50 trips, each taking weeks, each navigating 1,000 miles of dangerous, unpredictable river. This is an industrial-scale operation. And it all culminates at the port of Manaus. What was this port? Photographs from the period show us. It was not a modern harbor. It was a series of wooden piers jutting out into a river with a seasonal water level that could vary by over 40 feet. Where were the cranes needed to lift a 5-ton block of Italian marble, or a 10-ton Scottish steel girder, from the hold of a ship, swing it over the water, and place it safely on the dock? They did not exist. The official accounts are silent on this crucial step. Are we to believe this was all done with simple wooden derricks and manual labor? The physics of such an operation are staggering. Once on land, the problem continues. The materials must be moved from the dock to the construction site. Through the muddy, unpaved streets of Manaus. Again, look at the photographs. There are no paved roads capable of supporting wagons laden with tons of stone. Ox carts would sink into the mud. How were these colossal components moved? Were they dragged by hundreds of men? Every single step of this logistical chain, from the European quarry to the construction site, is fraught with practical, physical impossibilities when measured against the documented technology of the time and place. It describes a 20th century operation being conducted with 19th century tools in a pre-industrial environment. It's not a question of money. It's a question of mechanics. And the mechanics do not work. When faced with such profound logistical contradictions, an investigator naturally turns to the primary sources. The documentation, the ledgers, the manifests, the blueprints. This is where the proof of a project should lie. But in the case of the Teatro Amazonas, the official records are precisely where the story becomes most suspect. Where are the shipping manifests? For a private construction project of this magnitude, there should be a mountain of paperwork. Every shipload from Europe would have generated customs declarations, bills of lading, and insurance documents. These would specify the exact contents of the cargo, its weight, its origin, and its destination. For 10 years, a steady stream of ships carrying nothing but materials for the Opera House should have been arriving in Brazil. Their records should be in the archives in Belém and Manaus. They are not. Historians have found general references to materials being imported for the city's development, but specific, itemized manifests for thousands of tons of marble and steel for this one building are conspicuously absent. Where are the Port Authority records from Manaus? A port, no matter how primitive, keeps logs. Which ships docked? When? What did they unload? The scale of this operation would have dominated the port's activity for a decade. It would have been the single largest undertaking in the city's history. The records should be unequivocal. Instead, they are vague or missing entirely for the key construction years. Where are the full architectural and engineering blueprints? While design sketches exist, the detailed structural plans for the Scottish steel frame, the kind of technical documents an engineering firm would need to fabricate and assemble such a structure, have never been produced. These are not artistic drawings, they are precise, mathematical plans essential for any such construction. Their absence is deeply troubling. The official narrative, when questioned on these specifics, retreats into generalities. It speaks of the vision of the governor, the wealth of the rubber barons, and the determination of the workers. These are emotional appeals, not logistical explanations. They create a myth, not a historical account. The story becomes a simple template. A resource boom creates sudden wealth, and this wealth is used to build a cultural monument. This same template is used to explain other anomalous structures around the world. It is a convenient narrative that papers over the details because the details do not add up. Think about the financials. The project was plagued by stops and starts, changing architects and massive cost overruns over its 12-year construction period. This is presented as evidence of its difficulty. But it could also be interpreted as evidence of something else: the difficulty of maintaining a cover story. The challenge of retrofitting an existing, ancient structure and making it appear as if it were being built from scratch. A renovation, disguised as a construction. This would explain the sporadic work periods and the confusing financial trail. The official story fails because it provides no verifiable evidence for the most difficult and unbelievable parts of its claim. It asks us to trust the narrative without providing the documentation to support it. A story without evidence is not history. It is folklore. The Teatro Amazonas, viewed in isolation, might be dismissed as a one-of-a-kind miracle, an exception to the rules of history and logistics. But when you look globally, you discover it is not an exception at all. It is part of a distinct, repeating pattern. A formula. This formula appears again and again in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, primarily in colonial outposts or resource boomtowns. The pattern is this: a remote, undeveloped location experiences a sudden explosion of wealth from a single resource. Within a remarkably short time, a highly ornate, European-style architectural masterpiece appears, one that seems utterly incongruous with its surroundings and the local technological capacity. The official story is always the same: the newly rich patrons imported the finest European materials and craftsmen to build it. The logistical details are always glossed over. The records are always sparse. Consider the Municipal Theater of Iquique, in Chile. Built in 1889 in the middle of the Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth. At the time, Iquique was the global center of the saltpeter mining boom. The theater is a stunning piece of neoclassical architecture, built almost entirely of Oregon pine. We are told that thousands of tons of intricate woodwork, seating, and stage machinery were shipped 8,000 miles from North America, around Cape Horn, to a port on the edge of a barren desert. It was then assembled in just 1 year. Again, a miracle of logistics in a place with no trees, little fresh water, and minimal infrastructure. Or look at the Basilica of San Sebastian in Manila, the Philippines. Completed in 1891, it is the only all-steel church in Asia. The official story states that 1,600 tons of prefabricated steel sections were made in Belgium, shipped in 8 separate steamships to the Philippines, and then assembled on site. This was supposedly designed by a student of Gustav Eiffel. Here we have the same motif. The most advanced European industrial technology, prefabricated and shipped halfway around the world to a colonial territory, with the assembly process presented as a simple matter of bolting pieces together. The sheer complexity of ensuring every one of the thousands of steel plates arrived in the correct order, undamaged, and that a local workforce could assemble it, is staggering. Yet the story is presented as simple fact. The pattern repeats in Sucre, Bolivia, with its opulent white city architecture appearing at high altitude in the Andes during the silver boom. It appears in cities across the American West, where massive stone courthouses and opera houses spring up in dusty cattle towns seemingly overnight. In every case, the narrative is identical. A resource boom provided the money, and the money made the impossible possible. But does it? Or is this narrative a convenient explanation for structures whose true origins are unknown? Is it possible that in many of these locations, a foundational structure, perhaps a ruin from a previous, forgotten era of global civilization, was discovered? These structures, built with a lost technology and superior engineering, were then claimed, refurbished, and repurposed by the newly powerful colonial or industrial elite. The resource boom didn't fund the construction from scratch. It funded the renovation and the creation of a cover story. The Teatro Amazonas is not a singular anomaly. It is the most striking example of a global phenomenon. A pattern of architectural impossibilities that all share the same convenient, and ultimately hollow, explanation. Let us set aside the narrative and focus on the cold, hard language of mathematics. Stories can be manipulated. Numbers are less forgiving. We will use conservative estimates to analyze the logistical load of constructing the Teatro Amazonas. First, the total weight of imported materials. Let's focus on just two components, the marble and the steel. Sources suggest hundreds of tons of Carrara marble were used for the staircases, lobby, and columns. Let's be extremely conservative and say 500 tons. The steel frame, essential for a building of this size, would involve at least another 500 tons of girders and supports. This gives us a baseline of 1,000 tons for just these two materials, ignoring the 36,000 roof tiles, the French furniture, the Murano glass, the plaster, the brass fittings, and the massive wooden stage. The real number is likely many times higher, but we will work with this 1,000-ton minimum. Now, consider the transport. A typical cargo steamship of the 1890s had a capacity of around 2,000 deadweight tons. So, theoretically, one single ship could carry all of this material across the Atlantic. But it's not that simple. Cargo is not just weight, it's also volume and type. Delicate marble cannot be piled like coal. Long steel girders require specific storage. A mixed cargo would be necessary, likely requiring several voyages. But let's grant the best-case scenario. One ship carries the 1,000 tons to the mouth of the Amazon. There, it must be transferred to riverboats. A large Amazonian river steamer of the period might have a capacity of 400 tons, but it would be unlikely to carry such a dense, heavy, and specialized load. A more realistic capacity for such items would be 100 to 200 tons per trip. Using a generous 200-ton capacity, our 1,000 tons of material requires 5 separate, dedicated river voyages. A single round trip from Belém to Manaus and back, battling the current, could easily take a month. So we are looking at a minimum of 5 months of continuous river transport for just the steel and marble, assuming perfect conditions, no accidents, and a dedicated vessel. Now, let's consider the labor. The population of Manaus in 1890 was around 10,000 to 15,000 people. It was a frontier town. How many of these were skilled European stonemasons, structural steelworkers, and mosaic tilers? The answer is virtually none. The official story claims these artisans were brought from Europe. Let's imagine a core team of 100 skilled workers. These men and their families had to be transported, housed, fed, and paid for the entire duration of the project, over a decade. This is a massive logistical operation in itself, before a single stone is laid. It involves creating a small European town within Manaus, with all the necessary supplies, also shipped from abroad. The numbers create a feedback loop of impossibility. More materials require more ships. More workers require more housing and more supply ships. The entire project balloons into a logistical operation on the scale of a military campaign, all focused on building a single concert hall. Yet, there is no corresponding record of this massive undertaking. The census data for Manaus does not show a sudden, massive influx of European artisans. The port records do not show a dedicated fleet of cargo ships. The numbers tell a clear story. The required input of material and specialized labor is fundamentally incompatible with the documented capacity of the location. The equation is broken. The official history asks us to accept a result where the inputs are missing. If the official narrative of construction from scratch is a logistical fantasy, what is the alternative? We must propose a hypothesis that fits the evidence, one that does not rely on miracles or magic money. The most logical and controlled explanation is this: the Teatro Amazonas was not built in 1896. It was restored. The core of the hypothesis is that a significant structure already existed on that site long before the rubber boom. This was not a pile of ruins, but a still standing, structurally sound building from a previous, unrecorded era. A remnant of a lost chapter of history. This old-world structure may have been built with techniques and materials far more advanced than those available in the 19th century, explaining its incredible durability. When the rubber barons came to power in Manaus, they found this edifice. It was perhaps weathered and overgrown, but its magnificent bones were intact. Its marble staircases and steel frame were already there. The project of the 1880s and 90s was not one of construction, but of ambitious, expensive renovation. This hypothesis resolves nearly all of the logistical impossibilities. They did not need to ship a 1,000-ton steel frame up the Amazon. They only needed to clean it, paint it, and repair it. They did not need to transport thousands of tons of marble blocks. The grand staircase was already in place, perhaps requiring only polishing and patching. The work would have focused on the cosmetic and the decorative. Shipping the 36,000 ceramic tiles for the dome is plausible. It's a difficult task, but far more achievable than shipping the structure that supports it. Shipping delicate Murano chandeliers and Parisian furniture is a logistical challenge, but it is in a completely different category from shipping the core building materials. This explains the nature of the historical records. The documents we do have, contracts for painters, plasterers, and electricians, all point to finishing work, not heavy construction. The missing records, the shipping manifests for steel and marble, the heavy engineering blueprints, are missing because they never existed. The project didn't require them. This hypothesis also explains the stops and starts and the ballooning budget. Renovating an ancient, unknown structure would be filled with unforeseen challenges. Discovering structural weaknesses, dealing with water damage, figuring out how to integrate modern electrical systems into a building not designed for them. These would lead to delays and spiraling costs. The narrative of building an opera house was the cover story. It was a way for the new elite to claim this magnificent structure as their own creation, a symbol of their power and culture. It was a way to write their own history over a past they did not understand, or perhaps, one they were instructed to conceal. We do not need to speculate on who the original builders were. Were they a forgotten colonial expedition? A much older, advanced indigenous culture? A remnant from a previous global civilization? The identity of the builders is a separate question. The critical point of this hypothesis is that the timeline is wrong. The official story conflates a renovation with a creation. By doing so, it creates a myth of industrial era prowess while hiding a much more profound mystery. Who is capable of building a structure of this magnificence in the heart of the Amazon? And why has their history been erased? So we are left with a profound contradiction. An object of immense beauty and technical sophistication that, according to the available evidence, could not have been built when and where they say it was. The official story of the Teatro Amazonas asks us to believe in a series of logistical miracles. A miracle of transport, a miracle of engineering, a miracle of labor. It offers us a romantic tale, but provides none of the mundane, boring proof that must accompany any great undertaking. No manifests, no blueprints, no ledgers. In place of evidence, it offers us a narrative, a story of rubber boom ambition. But when the numbers are run and the practicalities are examined, that story dissolves. What remains is the building itself, a silent witness. It stands as a monument, but perhaps not to the men who claimed it. It may be a monument to a forgotten history, a history that has been systematically overwritten. The questions raised by this single building in the Amazon are not unique to it. The pattern is global. All around us, in cities new and old, stand structures whose official creation stories begin to fray under close scrutiny. We are encouraged to admire their beauty, but not to question their logistics. To celebrate the myth, but not to check the math. The Teatro Amazonas is not just an opera house. It is an invitation to stop accepting stories and to start asking questions. To look at the world around you, at the foundations of your own city, and to ask the simple, powerful question: how did this actually get here? The evidence of a different past is all around us, hiding in plain sight, waiting for those who are willing to look. The investigation does not end here. It begins.